thank you all for coming to be part of this evening. Usually when we talk about the work of Machik and the work of engagement that we do, we just talk about what that work is, and I think it speaks for itself. John has asked us to talk about the approach that we take and the underlying vision of that work. So tonight, because we both get a chance to talk, usually it's one or the other, we're also talking about the why and the how of this work. And most importantly, I want to get across the extent to which this is truly a new and different perspective in the Tibet world. And just to give you an understanding of that, I'll share with you my very unfortunate experience. I made an appearance on the Charlie Rhodes show last year in the aftermath of the unrest. In hindsight, poorly considered appearance. And within minutes of the broadcast, in the middle of the night, I started getting emails from people. I hesitate to call it hate mail, but let's say disappointed mail. And it continued for weeks. You know, Tibetans were writing to me, you know, all block caps, shame on you, and how could you do this? And I learned afterwards that there was actually a campaign. What's even more embarrassing is it was a campaign to protest the Charlie Rhodes show. So I'm sure those production people must be, you know, they were wondering who the heck are these people? I mean, myself, to be protested so virulently. But in any case, there was a web forum that emerged, that there was a lot of discussion about our intentions and motivations and the work that we do. And, you know, some really truly egregious things, like discussions about the number 8 in my email address. And it's an automatically generated email address, but people took that as a sign of I am a Chinese agent. But there was a lot of good discussion too. There was a lot of thoughtful discussion that happened. 6,000 people were in on this conversation, and it struck us that Losang and I have had this extraordinary experience working the past 10 years in Tibet with communities there, and this was our first time having articulated the perspectives that we had to an open public, and it was very disorienting. It was very difficult for people to kind of wrap their heads around what we were saying. It was so different, the message we were giving, and the tone in which we were giving that message was so different. And if you have not, seen what we've seen and had the experience to know what we've known, then it's very difficult to understand. And so, for a lot of Tibetans in exile and the larger Tibet constituency, the global Tibet, there is a profound ethical dilemma here. We won't sugarcoat it. These are very dark days for Tibet. The region is militarized. There is a crackdown going on. People are disappearing in the middle of the night. And it's disorienting for people to think, well, in this context, how can we be talking about schools and libraries and women's rights and domestic violence? These seem like indulgences to talk about these things. We are showing up to say, point out the specific things that aren't working and rolling up our sleeves and saying, okay, how can we be part of fixing the things that are broken? So the answer to this question about this ethical dilemma is that this dilemma only exists if you're caught up in a particular way of seeing the problem. And that comes with the prevailing assumptions that we make, the categories in which we think. And the work that we do already operates in a new paradigm. And so that's what I want to talk about is why is this possible? How do we resolve these issues for ourselves? And where do we go from here? And so in describing the features of this new paradigm, the first and most important is the fact that we have shifted our standpoint. And that means that we've learned to see from other people's eyes. We have had a typical exile experience, born in a refugee community in India and raised, working class, parents were factory workers. And so growing up in exile means you grow up with this permanent sense of loss. And so when you think about Tibet as an issue for most Tibetans in exile and most of the global Tibet constituency, it's in terms of that loss. It's in terms of the loss of the homeland in 1959 is the thing that you're focused on. But through the experience that we've had, not just to go back to Tibet, but to work with communities, building things together, becoming a local stakeholder, because we're all building it, and our lives are interpenetrated. We start to see something very different, and we realize that there are millions and millions of people here on the plateau, this region the size of Western Europe, for whom Tibet, the issue is not just about 1959, it is about everything, every dimension of their lives. So it's from something as simple as wanting a chance to learn to read and write, which most Tibetans don't do because the education system is broken. And they get it, they understand that most people in the world do get to learn to read and write. That's an incredibly empowering act, and they would like to be able to do that too. Something so simple as that to something more complex as just having dignity in their everyday lives, going about whatever it is they do, trying to start a business, taking care of their own sick or elderly. They want to be able to do these things with dignity, and that's more complicated. But so our sense of what the Tibet issue became so much more complex because of that shift in standpoint. It is no longer about the exile condition for us. It's about the needs of these people, these communities. And with this shift in standpoint comes a new approach to politics. And this is the second feature of the new paradigm. Instead of a politics of desire, this need to re-articulate what it is you wish you had, or that you regret, or that you resent, our thinking is in terms of a politics of outcome, of how do we create the conditions for the kind of world we would like to see, and how do you set in motion the processes that can create that world, create those conditions. So we're asking a different set of questions. And for this to work out, we needed to see the limits of the old categories. And in particular, we had to come to terms with the limits of the concept of sovereignty. And of course, sovereignty has been the major organizing idea on the Tibet issue. And in the world of sovereignty as a concept, it's a zero-sum game. Somebody has it, somebody doesn't, they probably like it back. And so it's been a very powerful way of framing the problem, and it continues to be a powerful way for the Tibetan issue to be articulated in the global public domain. And it's taken the Tibet issue very far. And just to remind you how far we've come, 20 years ago, before just when the decision to internationalize, so-called, the Tibet issue was made, before that time, the Dalai Lama was persona non grata at the State Department. He was not welcome to walk the halls there. And when he gave public talks, he would give public talks in suburban basements. And the odd thing is that we didn't think there was anything strange about that. And so much has changed since then. In that very lonely world, the generation of our elders made a leap of faith. And they chose to leave their dusty refugee communities in India and made an improbable quest to try to change the hearts and minds of people around the world and to make them care about Tibet and to make them, to create a new global consensus about the plight of the Tibetan people. Their improbable achievement has made it possible for us to imagine what it would take to then actually achieve meaningful change in Tibet. And that is to change the hearts and minds of the Chinese people and to create a consensus inside China. But to do this, we need to really, finally, I think, for once and for all, re-examine the ways in which we perceive the problem, the way we see the problem. And in particular, this concept of sovereignty. Both China and Tibetans have given great weight to the idea of sovereignty in how we think about the problem. But in truth, it's been a 20th century experiment, not just for China, not just for Tibet, but also for the entire world. Even the quintessential nation state, in a sense, is maybe Germany, right, where you have this the nation and the state being coterminous, well, that was, brought together in 1871.